When we read these Gospels and in context, way back when they were shaped, you have to keep in mind that the communities listening to the Word and shaping the Word, which appears to us now in the Gospels, expected the world to come to an end in the near future. And therefore, there is much conversation in the New Testament about the parousia, about the second coming and the end of the world, which is imminent. Therefore, it had a meaning for the early communities today, the one of Luke, that it would not have for us. We don't think the end of the world is imminent. However, there is a teaching in here for us. It speaks about being vigilant. So let me reflect for a few moments on the notion of spiritual vigilance. Some years ago, I was traveling in Asia, and I stopped in Nepal, in Kathmandu, in the foothills of Mount Everest there, to do a retreat for a week. I spent a week there with the Jesuits doing a retreat, and they tell the story in Kathmandu about the Buddha. About 400 years before Christ, Siddhartha Gautama was born in Kathmandu, in Nepal. His father was minor royalty. He was a Raj. He was a kind of a well-off royalty of some kind. And therefore, the young Siddhartha Gautama was raised in the palace, and he was given everything, all the luxuries of the world. Got married to a young princess. But somehow, as he was growing in his young years, he began to understand there was more to life than all the luxuries and the riches of the palace. So it's a long story. The short version of the story is he decides to leave the palace and go in search of the meaning of life. So he wanders off as a mendicant, kind of a person with no money, just finding his way. And he wandered around and around. He came to a place called Sarnath, which is on the Ganges, near Varanasi, which is a famous holy city of the Hindus. And there he had enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, and Siddhartha Gautama became the Buddha. He began to preach, and his followers were enchanted by him, but somewhat confused. And so they said to him, "Are you a god?" And he said, "I'm not a god." "Then what are you? Not who are you, but what are you?" "Are you an angel?" He said, "No, I'm not an angel." "Are you a prophet?" He said, "No, I'm not a prophet." He said, "Then what are you?" And he said, "I am awake. I am awake." And that's called Buddha consciousness. And that's what appears in this gospel today. What it means to be awake, to be spiritually awake, to sense God's presence, to feel the pain of the other person, to interpret the struggles of the other person, to be awake to the other person, to be alert, to see the signs of the time, to see the emptiness of the world and the riches of a spiritual journey. That's what it means to be awake. In the Buddhist tradition, they call it Buddha consciousness, which means you're connected. You're connected with a spiritual awareness of all that surrounds you. That's what this gospel is about for us. For the people way back in the time of Luke's early church, they were awake to the coming of the end of the world. But for us, the teaching is to connect. It could be to connect to people in your family, to people in your neighborhood, people in your church. Connect with the people who are struggling to belong, but are told they don't fit. How do you feel their pain, the struggle, the the anxiety. The people who are heavily burdened that you know, sometimes you'll get this strange phone call, somebody will call you. You wonder why that person called me. Maybe it was their loneliness, maybe it was the struggle they had in their life, they needed to talk to somebody. And maybe we rush so much, we miss much of what's happening that's very important around us. So the gospel today says, be aware, be alert for the coming of the Lord. For God appears to us in many, many forms. When we begin to complain and we see another person who is really struggling with their health, we become aware, we become more grateful. So journey through this day with this sense of connection, with the Buddha consciousness, with the awareness of God's presence in all the things that surround us. That's a call to holiness. Holiness is not just saying prayers and saying prayers. Holiness is to live in the presence of God. If we live in the presence of God, we'll see with new eyes. We'll understand the happenings of life in a new way. Amen. Pause now for a moment of prayer.